Hey, this is Haley, and welcome back to Bookshelf Bard. In honor of Valentine's Day, I decided to share a genre that I'm in love with. It's probably one of my favorites. People either hate it or they love it, and I feel like if you hate it, you just haven't found the right authors yet or been exposed to the right novels. It is the horror, thriller, and suspense genre. I don't feel like it gets enough credit. I feel like if an author can just make you feel fear, if they can make you catch your breath in suspense, that's a master at his work. I mean, just from a few simple words on a page, it can make you feel this tremendous emotion. I feel like that is art. And so, without further ado, it comes as no surprise that the master of horror, the king of horror, Stephen King, is going to be first and comprise a couple of the books on this list. The first is The Stand by Stephen King. And it's my favorite book, hands down. Not only is it my favorite horror book, my favorite book of all time. And it still holds true. I've read this 2 or 3 times, and it has such a huge cast of characters that King just fleshes out spectacularly. He provides such tremendous backstories. You fall in love with this story of underdogs. You are set in a post-apocalyptic world where 99% of the population has been wiped out by this respiratory virus, ironically enough. And the good people end up going to Nebraska, and then the inherently evil people go towards Las Vegas. And as if that wasn't an interesting premise already, the Antichrist has risen, and he organizes this systematic chaos and violence that ultimately culminates in this good versus evil battle. And I didn't realize this when I was refreshing my memory for this video today, but Stephen King intended this to be kind of comparative to Lord of the Rings, in that it's an epic, dark fantasy, and I think he did a good job. Excellent job. In fact, still, hands down, a decade and a half later, my favorite book. So, it's going to take you a while. I mean, it's a lengthy novel. It's worth it. There's nothing else I can say. You will not regret reading this book, his greatest work. If you just pick up one of his novels, please let it be this one. Next up is a work from an author that I really wish I had read more. She's had best-selling novels like Dark Places. Gone Girl is probably her most famous one, but the one I ended up picking up and ended up loving is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. And this follows Camille, who's a journalist reporter. She's returning home to investigate a series of brutal child murders that have occurred. And as she's having to unravel this present horrendous crime that she's investigating, the memories of her younger sister, who died at a young age under mysterious circumstances, have to resurface. And so Flynn does such a good job of incorporating these chilling elements like self-mutilation, if you're sensitive to the topic. You have this eerie doll-like family that kind of pervades this whole novel. And then also the mental illness, Munchausen's by proxy. And Flynn does such a good job of incorporating this twist at the ending that is not a stereotypical horror novel ending. She does such a good job. And the web that she weaves, connecting the past to the present, is beautiful, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. So Flynn did such a good job with this novel. And you can't have a list of horror without including The Shining by Stephen King. And my copy has seen better days. I'm going to delicately open this up. There are pages missing. I've read this 2 to 3 times. And while we're all familiar with Kubrick's reimagination of the novel, I mean, it was visually stimulating, but it left so much out of the novel. We know Danny, Jack, and Wendy's story, how they became caretakers of the Overlook Hotel and are isolated in this winter, this mountainous region, and the madness that ends up overtaking Jack especially. Besides, the rotting bathtub guest, you've got the creepy twins in the hallway. There's just so many horrific scenes that King spectacularly puts in this novel. I remember one scene especially where Danny is in the playground playing, and he's in this tunnel, and the snow starts to fall unnaturally fast, and the exits to this tunnel start to close up, and it starts to darken, and he realizes he's not alone in this playground tunnel. and he starts to hear the scramblings of this ghostly child, and it becomes a race to get to the exit before he's grabbed from the darkness. And just so many just stimulating scenes like that. And actually, not many people know, and it's a worthy mention. You know, Doctor Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, and it took a kind of a sci-fi twist, but it was a worthy follow-up, and it was recreated into film by Mike Flanagan, who did series like The Haunting of Hill House. So he did a pretty good job with it, especially with the casting for that movie. It was spectacular. I wish he would redo The Shining, because I think he would incorporate so many good scenes, and so I'm really excited for him to tackle monumental movies like that. You know, I know Kubrick did such a good job, but Mike Flanagan, redo this movie appropriately and give it the attention it deserves. So before I put this list together, I was starting a couple new novels at the time, and I stumbled across a new favorite, and it was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it incorporates a lot of new elements I'm not used to seeing. Garcia just so excellently blurs that line between dreaming and wakefulness and reality and the supernatural throughout this book. It was spectacularly done. I didn't feel like it was quickly put together or shallow storyline. It was very well done. It follows 1950s Mexico type setting, and you have this protagonist, Noemi, who has received a distraught and confused letter from her cousin. And so she decides to check on her welfare and visit her in this reclusive family she's been married off to. And once she gets there, she realizes something's wrong. And she starts to come in contact with this supernatural entity and this feeling that pervades this entire moldy household. And the lines, like I said, between reality and the supernatural and dreaming become distorted. And it's got some great elements. You've got murder-suicides. You've got this historic family bent on the science of eugenics. If you're familiar with the concept of the cordyceps fungus, that is interspersed throughout the entire book. And I think it was just spectacularly done. It had a good ending. It's one of my new horror favorites, and I think you'll love it too. So I started with Stephen King, and I'm going to end with him. He is the king of horror, so I had to include a couple of my favorites. Last on the list is Geralds Game. And this follows Jess, who goes on a romantic getaway with her husband, and a kinky sex game ensues, which she's not so crazy about, but the cuffs come out and she gets strapped to the bed. And so as this game is initiated, her husband suffers a heart attack and dies. And so she's strapped to the bed, and it becomes a game of survival. And as she's surviving this ordeal, this childhood trauma starts to resurface, and she has to deal with a lot more than her current predicament. And so it flips back and forth between the memories of her childhood and her surviving this isolation and getting out of this situation. King did such a good job. It's a serious topic, and it's well done. I love the story and how it unravels. And it was recently done in a Netflix series, or not a series, a Netflix movie by Mike Flanagan. And he did The Haunting of Hill House, and I think he did an excellent job imagining this as a movie. So I would check it out. It's worth your time. And this is a quick read. It really doesn't take too long, but well worth it. So I hope you enjoyed my horror picks, and pick up a few. You'll be surprised how much you really do love the genre and how many serious topics are kind of addressed in each one. But they're really good. These are my top 5.